Good morning, friends. I would like to thank ASQ for giving me an opportunity to present in this session on the topic establishing a culture of risk-based thinking. This concept is a part of the supply chain activity, how to strengthen the supply chain with quality management. Friends, now I would like to give my views based on my knowledge and experience and share the ideas with all of you. To introduce myself, I am Venkat I. Rao Pendyala, currently Technical Director, Global Integrated Management Services. I am lead auditor and trainer for various ISO 9000 standards, 14000 and 22000 standards. I am also Six Sigma Green Belt certified. I am ASQ member since 1998. To start with, the main objectives of this session is to learn what are the teachings or the practices that are required for the employees to develop a risk-based culture among themselves to benefit an organization. Through these principles, the organization has to balance its supply chain relations and establish a risk-based management system. The importance of the risk-based thinking culture should be known to each and every employee of an organization, which will ultimately result in the innovative practices and novelty in the work culture. That is the main objective which I wanted to share through this session. See, when we discuss, there are certain important, rather primary keywords are there in this particular topic. They are the strengthening supply chain quality and risk. Here when we talk about the strengthening, what are the practices that ultimately strengthen the supply chain relations, and what are the quality parameters that are required or included in this, and how a risk will impact on overall supply chain relations. So when we talk about the risk, we know risk is an uncertainty situation. Risk is not existing at any point of time, but there is a threat or a potential danger of such things happening. So because we do not know what exactly the risk is, then a necessity for the proactive approach is essential. When we do a detailed study and analyze the various similar situations that occurred in the past in our organization or those organizations which we are familiar with or associated with, that study will help us to take a proactive approach in risk-based management system. Otherwise, it is a situation only when a problem comes we resort to for a particular solution. This will result in loss of lot of resources, and even the effectiveness of the solution is also not guaranteed. So in of this, we need to take a proactive approach. What are the fundamentals of this thinking process on proactive approach? So essentially we need to have the detailed knowledge on the subject and what is the methodology we are going to adopt. The commitment to think both positive and negative perspective of each occurrence or a possible occurrence in each activity is essential. When I talk about the positive and negative prospects, I am neither pessimistic nor optimistic, but when we think about the positive, we can always take the advantages of the possible solutions. Similarly, when we think about the negative, we can always think about how to prevent such negative possible occurrences. So in view of this, a study both in the positive and negative perspective is not only helpful but also it will pave a way for a better solutions. Another important thing in the organization to ensure the proactive approach is the ownership. See, organization has number of employees and each employee works for a paycheck. But each employee has a responsibility of a particular activity or a process. When such employee thinks or believes that his particular activity is his own, he has an ownership on that particular process or activity, the resultant processes will be very much helpful and useful in such a way. And this kind of a proactive approach should be a habitual thinking. So each employee has to develop a practice or a process of how to think critically about each situation and each activity and what are the potential problems that activities may involve in it. Well, we know an organization has important elements, that is a management. But in my present talk, I consider the culture is also one of the essentials in an organization. So any establishment, any organization which has a management that will encourage a culture throughout its organization for all activities and all employees, it will help the overall performance of the organization. See, we have the famous popular management expert Peter Drucker who says culture eats strategy for the breakfast. What exactly it means? See, normally for any activity, either for a breakfast, lunch, or for performing in a particular activity, we do have a plan or a strategy. So normally this strategy will help in achieving those objectives. See, when somebody plans for a breakfast, you have a strategy. What is the breakfast to be prepared and who are the people to consume such breakfast and who are the persons involved. But when we are talking about the culture, if that particular organization or particular process has already an established culture, the culture takes away the strategy and ultimately it will overlap the strategy for the breakfast or any other process. Hence it is said culture eats strategy for the breakfast. Here we should know what is a culture. See, culture is developed not on a single day or a single instance, but it is a habitual act. It is a habitual act of doing something without any external force or influence, and it should be a continuous process with a conscience. It may be unconsciously also. A particular activity carried out as a normal process, that becomes a culture. When you introduce a lot of other ingredient, other practices, other artificial things, then it becomes a planned strategy. But the culture by itself, it takes course of a habitual act of doing so, any activity. See, when we discuss about the proactive approach, we have discussed some of the important things, how a proactive approach should be taken into the consideration. See, when a culture is developed for a proactive approach, the total activities will be encapsulated into a particular single shell, and this shell will be considered as a culture, and this will protect the various activities of an organization. And culture is a gradual growth process in habits, practices, and good consensus, which are accepted by the organization, which will protect as a shield to the organization. Any stabilized, well-contended practices, if organization is running, this will become a major part of the culture. So whenever I talk or I term the culture, means it is the practices of the employees, which is a natural process through which they do their routine work. Well, here I just wanted to also add the biological term culture. See, normally the culture means a biological organism. It's a living organism. So why that culture and a biological culture both are discussed here? See, in case of a biological culture, it is a living organism. It has a potential growth by itself. If that particular culture is harmful, then the total whatever the growth also become the harmful. If that particular culture has a positive thing, then there is a lot of benefits out of that culture will be using. So similarly in the organization also, when a particular organization emphasizes on the employees culture, if that culture is well established with the positive thinking, risk-based analysis, then the benefits for the organizations are enormous. And when we are talking about this type of a culture, one must understand that management should consider to train the employees for the habit of thinking critically, analytically and positively for any activity or aspect of the organization, so that this particular activity will develop into the proactive thinking for any risk-based process, for any potential dangers that are likely to faced by the organization. This culture also helps not only for the possibilities of having any particular issue or activity, but also possible solutions to counter and prevent any such happenings that may endanger the organization's activities. Now coming back to the risk-based thinking, as we have been discussing, risk-based thinking means your thinking process is always first thought that there may be a risk if I do this activity. For each activity there are positive and negative things which we have discussed. So when I do this activity, what are the possible areas where I may have a problems, which normally we call as a potential problems or potential non-conformities. If the thinking process is there in the direction, then you will know, the employee will know there is a risk if I take up this activities in this particular way. So then the employee will think, okay, if this is what exactly I should take or this is what I should not take for my future prospect of the activity, so that I will not have any problem. That is exactly the risk-based thinking. And that this risk-based thinking always takes the two way. One is based on 1, 2, 3 activities that management will guide you. Secondly is based on a culture. The culture means each and every employee thinks about each activity and he is well aware of the consequences of his activity. Will there be any non-conformance if I do this way? If there are any potential non-conformance, what is the action I am required to take? That's how the risk-based thinking is evolved. And this is a totally proactive mechanism, and it also considers what if I do this, what if I use this concept, what if I do not think in this direction. So these are all some of the things that risk-based thinking give you the triggers to the employees. And this is not only to arrest the upcoming non-conformities or potential non-conformities, but also it gives you a way for the various ideas for the improvement in organization. In an organization, normally we have 3 strategies that any organization, any management will consider: a planned, circumstantial and emergencies. Normally organization, as everybody is aware, your PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act, circle, which is one of the concept of the management. See, in such way what normally we do is we always plan the activities and then carry out, then the check whether the activities are performed as per the plan, and then we always analyze, and if there are any issues then you take relative actions that are required. That is for a planned activity. But coming back to the certain things, whatever the planning an organization does, sometimes there may be certain circumstances which will hamper your processes, which will interfere into your planned actions. In such case, what type of the actions you need to take based on the circumstantial situations. That is also one of the activities that management in organization should consider. Then finally, there are situations for normally what we call as the emergency situations. In case of emergency situations, what is the action we need to do? See, the management systems also gives us an idea what is the emergency preparedness. Particularly in case of environmental related, food related, safety related, any other such a type of activities where it is essential that the organization should prepare for the emergencies. That is what the emergency preparedness. In case of a emergency preparedness, what type of the actions or what type of the protocols that organization has established. So these are all the type of the ways one organization will think. Our risk-based thinking will help to tackle any of these particular situations in any management criteria. See, when we wanted to establish an organization, stability is important, and stability comes only through reactive and proactive steps. When we are talking about the organization with general planning, circumstantial planning and emergency planning, and also based on the culture, all this will help in developing, establishing proactive as well as a reactive steps that are required in stabilizing an organization process. See, when we talk about the process, any activity has three parameters which everybody knows: input, process and output. Any process again has a lot of activities in it. Again, any activity split into the input, process and output. This is essentially a circle or a total process encompasses in various so many micro and a macro level processes. When we are talking about this, when we wanted to develop a risk-based thinking and also establish the culture-based thinking, then it is essential that each activity in this input, process and output has to be in detail studied, and mapping is essential. Activity mapping helps us what will be the possible outcome of each activity, which has again the three steps, that is input, process and output. At each stage, what are the possible activities that may have a potential dangers or a potential non-conformance. So unless we make this proper mapping, an organization cannot take totally a good action that is essential for the development of the organization. See, whenever these activities are performed, what exactly our intention? Our result is a success, and the success always depending on the various ingredients of the input coupled with the techniques of the processes. And any non-compliance with any requirement at any stage, either during the input or during the process, that will result in a non-conforming product or a process. So to avoid this, a particular strategy has to be developed. The strategy is nothing but our risk-based thinking process. And to establish the risk-based thinking process, again, a culture of thinking about the risk-based thinking culture has to be established. Well, finally, when we wanted to ultimately make a product, the product always results, the end thing is only in the quality. So normally the quality, when we talk about the quality, there are three types of the quality that an organization can consider. The quality you accept as it is, or quality you change to the meeting the requirements or the specifications, or the quality that would ultimately become the best through improvement of the existing qualities to ultimate satisfaction of the consumers. So the quality again is a subjective, and it is a degree of the particular excellence or a degree of the process for the meeting minimum requirements. So when we understood totally the quality, how a quality can be related to the risk or related to the processes, that we need to understand. See, when we are talking about the quality and the culture is very much attached. Similarly, quality is attached with the risk and risk is attached with the culture. This is a triangular situation where the culture, quality and risk are there. But friends, when I am talking about these three parameters, here it is not just triangle, it is a circular loop. As you know, a loop means it is a continuous, it revolves around or evolves around till a final product or a final atmosphere is changed, final ambience is developed. So when we are talking about these three things, quality, culture, quality and risk, it should be a loop of a circular nature which will ultimately establish a culture that will give you the ultimate quality product, in which wherever the risks are there, the probable or a possible risk analysis has to be. This particular thing, again, when we are talking about the supply chain, it is important. Supply chain is nothing but, again, it's a set of activities. Normally when we consider the supply chain, it starts with the sender and the process of the transportation and the receiver. Generally when we talk about supply chain, when we take an example, we call farm to the plate, the one which is produced in the field, and ultimately after taking so many steps and processes, when it reaches the plate for a consumer for the consumption. Similarly, in any supply chain, whether it is a mechanical, electrical, information technology, whatever the subject we consider, supply chain is an essential part. And when we are talking about the strengthening the supply chain through the quality culture or a risk-based culture, we need to understand how this risk-based culture will help in our supply chain. Before we integrate our risk-based culture to the supply chain, we should understand how a risk can be identified, or what are the processes in the supply chain that we need to do it. So basically there are four important steps are there, which is a risk identification, where the focus should be always there with the possible risk at each activity. And once that activity is identified with the risk, then what is the assessment of the risk, how much risk is involved, whether it is a severity, probability or frequency, how you wanted to assess and evaluate. And once we understand the situation of the risk assessment, how do you overcome such risk through a risk based management. When we are talking about the risk-based management, how we wanted to develop and how to mitigate the risk, so that ultimately our entire supply chain will go into the possibilities. And finally, once you know how to identify and how to develop a risk and how to record it, how to manage it, then you have to monitor and take the necessary steps. So friends, what is important is in the supply chain, risk identification, risk assessment, risk management and risk monitoring. We know what is the supply chain, so I don't need to really discuss the concept of the supply chain, because supply chain basically takes care of all the processes in any activity. It may be a normal consumer related products, or it may be even a software developing programs, or it may be an applications. So in any case, the concept of the supply chain is same. It starts with a one point, have a different stages, and finally what exactly is the ultimate product. And in our case, we always consider that quality should be the output of all these activities. That is the basic concept of a supply chain. Second, when we are talking about the quality in the supply chain, normally the quality, thinking on a quality is totally different. See, normally when you accept the quality as it is considered a primitive way. That is what exactly, whatever it is there, you take it and you adjust yourself. That is a primitive way. And there is a development on the process of the quality, or thinking of the quality, is that whatever you get it and you check for its suitability, then only you accept it. This is a rational way that has been there for last few decades. Now a step ahead, whatever is accepted, whether it is not only meeting our requirement or suitability, but is it really giving something more than required. This is what the thinking process in an intelligent way. This is how we should understand for each activity in the supply chain also. The rationality and rational thinking, which involves again a risk-based thinking in the supply chain, ultimately should give us something more than what is expected. Then only the total responsibility in the supply chain is considered that it has been satisfactorily processed. Now, what is the importance of the risk-based thinking? We already discussed about the risk-based thinking. See, there is a popular saying that as you sow, so you reap. So even in case of a normal activity, whatever the inputs you give, you get the outputs to that extent. Similarly, when a risk-based thinking is there, when we are talking about the risk, which is a potential non-conformity or potential danger, what are the processes you will develop in the risk-based thinking? The results also to some extent only up to that level you will have it. Your risk-based thinking has more analytical, more in-depth, then whatever the possible dangers that are a potential non-conformance you have, you will be able to meet them without any problem. With less resources and more viability, you will be able to take out. So, as I already told, a risk is an unknown parameter, and when we wanted to consider this unknown parameter, there are two things, positive and negative. Positive, an opportunity to improvement, and negative is to prevent the mishappening or potential non-conformances. So these are all the parameters you have to involve when you are talking about the risk-based thinking. Even in the risk-based thinking, we always consider the risk is not a static. Risk is a dynamic. It is a way of the life, not only in normal human life, it is way of life in each and every process and activity. That is exactly we see today. The disruption is a continuous process. There are a lot of changes every day coming. Whether it is a static level, or it is a normal consumer products, or it is a food products, or it is a software technology or a IT technology. Everywhere all the risks are involved, and always these risks are dynamic. And when you understand the dynamism of the risk, then you will be able to take the steps towards the progressive world. This is how you wanted to do it. And if one wanted to avoid the risk, then he will be ending only at a static situation. No risk, there is no development, as we commonly hear these things. So each process will have a risk, and you need to have a risk-based thinking. You should not satisfied with a risk or avoid a risk which will ultimately take you to the static. Here, today's world, anything static means it is as good as a dead. There is no further progress on it. So, if we wanted a progressive world, always you have to consider the dynamic way of the risk-based thinking. And in an organization, if the organization has to develop whatever the requirements or the framework of the rules or regulations which an organization think they are vital to the organization, complying with those organizations and thinking about its results and the challenges of such a regulations for the continuity. If there is any relapse or a non-creativity is there, how to prevent such a relapse or a non-creativity, and think about the progressive way of organization development, one has to think. And only risk-based thinking culture helps in organization for innovative heights. When I was talking about the risk-based thinking parameters, ingredients that one has to do it. And when I am talking about the culture, it is a natural process where each and every employee thinks about the risk. It is not a kind of artificial thing, or it is not enforceable from external sources, but it is a built-in process that we are trying to develop our organization through its employees' culture. This culture only will make the organization dynamic, and particularly whenever there are changes are there, the changing times, innovation, disruption, or a competition, this particular culture will help the organization to meet anytime any requirements. And this also involves the accountability with the creativity. Each employee who is involved, who consider his process and activities his own, take the responsibility of the ownership, automatically takes the accountability. With this, the creativity also will be a natural process. So when we wanted to talk about the risk-based thinking or developing the culture through a risk-based, there are certain parameters are involved and characteristics are involved. The employee who is employed in organization or a management, they need to have certain characteristics. And some of the important characteristics is the decision making ability, critical analytical skill, thoughtful actions, clarity of mind, willingness to be transparent, and selective attention. Friends, try to understand each of these concepts are a characteristics. A decision making ability, whenever we are talking about the decision making, it is not only just for a top management. Decision taking at each and every, that is exactly why I said the employee takes the ownership. So when he takes the ownership, each of its activity performance, what is the result, he has to take a decision whether he is doing in a correct way or not. Similarly, a critical analytical skill is required. It may be a small work, a small activity, still the impact of that particular activity I am supposed to know as an employee. Then only I'll be able to think critically, and then I will decide whether what I am doing is correct or not. And four, thoughtful actions. This is again a question of a common sense. Thoughtfulness means what exactly I am doing it, whether is it going to have a positive thing or is it going to create an additional problem for us. That is more important. And all the more the clarity of the mind. Here the clarity of the mind means not just having a mind with a total clarity on the subject. Clarity of the mind includes the understanding of the process properly, understanding of the activity, what exactly the results of such activity. These are all the parameters should an employee know when he is talking about. This is exactly the clarity of the mind. And willingness to be transparent. See here, when I am using the word transparent or a transparency, what it means, whatever the action that employee is taken, it should be known to all. There should not be any stealthiness in his actions. Only if it is a transparent, if there is any issues out there, he himself can understand. So the transparency in his actions through whatever the formulations, whatever the framework he is taking about, once it is a transparent, he will be able to understand very clearly. And selective attention. Here again, selective attention means it is not just a focus that I am talking about it. Selective attention means when a particular action is taken, how far you have to focus your skills, your energies, and to what extent or wherever the areas you need to do, that is more important. That is what exactly selective attention. Where there is so much wastage is there, the prioritization is again important. So all these parameters, when an employee or a management is concerned, that is what exactly results in a selective attention. So there are other important things in the risk-based thinking which are associated in the supply chain, or whatever the customer patronage you wanted to develop, you wanted to establish. Are there proper established links are there with the supplier? Are these links are strong enough or stable enough to continue the process? These are all the things the organization has to consider. Similarly, what are the risks associated with your supplier when a product or a service is supplied to you in your supply chain? Do you identify such risks? And after those particular products or services have reached you for a next process, how far the risks are taking further? Or do you need to identify the risk and curtail there itself before the process takes into the next stage? So these are all the things you have to consider if you really wanted to have the entire process to be a smooth transition, and ultimately you wanted to give the customer the ultimate result or a ultimate quality service or a product. So here certain ingredients are there which are vital to the quality risk management. When I am using the quality risk management, again it is a concept. Risk is one concept, management is another concept, risk-based management is yet another concept. And when I am talking about the quality risk management, how a risk-based management are considered through a quality tools or a quality perspective. That is what I wanted to discuss here when I am talking about the ingredients vital to this quality risk management. See, when you identify the risk associated with the whatever the supplies, you have to every time you have to think about the quality of such supplies. Here I don't have to define the quality particularly what is the quality at each stage, because quality already we have considered. It is a normal way, a primitive way, or intelligent way how you consider your quality. So based on which you have to decide whatever the supplies comes to you, whether it is of a quality of whatever the classification you have decided, and to what extent this risk can be accepted. If there is any risk versus the products or services you have received, the prioritization of the various classifications of the risk, and what are the risks that you are willing to take which will not have a major impact, or what are the risks which you do not want it to take or a compromise. These are the things also you need to consider while talking about the quality risk management. And the continuity of the supplies is more important. See here, whenever we are talking about the risk and quality, there is every possibility that the supply chain gets broken when there is a lot of hurdles. Our intention is to have an unbroken chain of supplies. So to ensure the unbroken chain of supplies and ensure the continuity and conformity of the operation in the organization, a built-in process has to be developed. That particular process will be possible only if each and employee, for each and every activity, a culture based on the risk or a risk-based culture is developed by them. It is possible. Otherwise, it may result in any chain supply chain breaking here and there, and that will impact the total organization's activities. And another important ingredient is the conflict resolution management. See, managing the conflict is one of the important things in the quality risk management. Like I was telling, in the supply chain you may have so many issues coming up, and some of the issues will result in the conflict. The conflict may be in association with a specification, conflict may be with your other commercial terms, conflict may be with related to the competitors. Any such component in the supply chain are there, how do you manage? That is more important. A strategy has to be developed for the conflict resolution management. And overall, the impact of such conflict management will also help in your risk-based management thinking. And finally, the accountability with each of the creativity will help us only when you involve the employees to develop a risk-based thinking culture. Friends, here is some of the important things which I have already discussed. There are certain case studies out there how risk-based culture will help an organization. I have taken two such institutions based on my experiences in a previous few decades. Although I do not want to name the organizations, I can only tell one I have taken is a financial institution, other one is an organization in the consumer market. See, the financial institution which I was referring about is started with a low profile, where with a few employees and few investment, and the organization to start with, the concept of the risk-based culture was developed. Each employee is given the ownership of each activity. It may be a small clerical work, it may be a very low important activity in the organization, or it may be in the high level management related activities. So each activity, the employee who is assigned with such activity is considered the owner of such activity. So each employee is given the responsibility, accountability, and to think and make his work as a culture to the next process. That way, this particular financial institution, which started in a low profile about 3 decades ago, today it is one of the world's largest financial institution, and it has established and it developed leaps and bounds in its own development. Similarly, I was talking about a supply chain organization which related to consumer products. Same situation, but here this particular organization, which is a multinational organization, started its branches all over the globe with so much fancy and so much propaganda and all that. And ultimately, within a less than a decade, the organization has almost come to a naught stage, where the entity is totally zero. Simple reason is that all the employees were working as employees for a paycheck, and organization also considers they are working for the organization, and their work only gives the benefit or a profit to the organization, and it never thought about the bringing that employees into a culture of risk-based thinking And always organization top management thought that okay, I get the work done because I am paying a paycheck. So that kind of activity has made this particular organization almost to the top level to the nothing. So these are the two situations. I am just giving an example so that all the organizations should think what is the important of the employee developing a risk based culture and also risk based thinking in its supply chain. So friends, what all I just spoke in last almost 30-40 minutes, I feel I was able to communicate my views based on my knowledge and experience, and I am sure my audience, thankfully, gratefully, I am indebted to them that I was able to give a takeaway to audience that you became a familiar with the application of a risk-based management principle. What is a risk-based management? How important is a risk-based thinking to develop a culture to achieve the innovation? And also I feel that I was able to impart the information with respect to the what are the important ingredients in establishing a balanced approach in the supply chain while using the tools of the quality for the risk management. Friends, I did not specifically emphasize what are the quality tools because that itself is a big subject, and I only refer to important quality tools which you thought, I thought you should be able to involve in it. So this is all I wanted to share on this session. I hope I was able to reach you with whatever the possible clarity, and I'm very much thankful to you for patience hearing. So with this, I wanted to end my session with a brief acknowledgement to the ASQ. And if you have any questions, I welcome the audience to, you may ask for the questions, and you can ask now if the time permits, or you may reach me at the given contact details, my email and phone numbers. So that is all for the day. Before I finally close the session, I wanted to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to ASQ for giving me this opportunity. Even in these hard times of the corona, ASQ did not stop spreading the quality culture and bringing all the quality related issues through this world conference, through a virtual conference. And friends, since we are really going through the hard times, when this corona started almost few months ago, almost 1.5 years to 2 years now, and each time when we are talking about this, we have a hope and confidence that it will be over in next few months. But now I sincerely think that probably before end of this year, we should be get rid of this major problem. I sincerely hope that the next ASQ World Conference on Quality and Improvement, that is 2022 conference, hope we'll all meet together in the conference and a physical conference, and meet face to face. I wish you all the best, and have a safe times for you. Thanks again.